It was my wife's birthday, and I drove through the night with Daisy to surprise her. I intended to give her a pleasant surprise. But instead, I stumbled upon her in an intimate moment with her first love. That's when I realized that every business trip she took was actually a rendezvous with her lover.
Knowing that my wife Emily had a social engagement tonight, I sat in the hotel lobby with Daisy in my arms, waiting for her. I didn't know how much time had passed, but Daisy fell asleep in my arms. Just as I was about to call Emily, I heard a familiar voice.
I can't imagine being without you. What would I do tonight?
I looked up and saw Emily, slightly tipsy, clinging to a man's neck with a sparkle in her eyes. The man had his back to me, so I couldn't see his face. But when he turned around, my blood ran cold. The man was none other than Emily's first love, James. The two of them, completely ignoring the bustling lobby, were about to kiss.
Emily, what are you doing?
They both froze at the sound of my voice.
David, what are you doing here?
If I hadn't come, how could I have witnessed such a spectacular scene?
Their bold actions had already attracted the attention of passers-by, and now even more people were looking our way. Daisy stirred in my arms, showing signs of waking up. Not wanting to argue in front of Daisy, I asked Emily for the room key with a stern face and headed to the elevator.
David, you should have told me you were coming early. I wasn't prepared. David, let me hold Daisy for a while.
I sidestepped to avoid Emily's outstretched hand. The more she acted like this, the more guilty she seemed. Once in the room, I was even more certain that Emily had betrayed me. As I carefully placed Daisy on the bed, I noticed an open condom on the bedside table. Rage surged through me.
What's this?
Her expression turned unnatural as soon as she saw it.
David, let me explain. This must have been left by the previous guest. I have no idea how it got here.
And what about just now?
I was just drunk from the social event, and James has helped me a lot. I wanted to thank him. Besides, what's wrong with leaning on him when I'm drunk?
Thank him by offering yourself to his bed?
That's not fair.
Give me your phone.
Why?
I didn't say anything, just kept looking at her until she handed over the phone. The password was still the same, Daisy's birthday. I opened her WeChat, and ironically, James's messages were pinned at the top, while mine were buried under a pile of group messages. James and Emily worked at the same company, and they occasionally talked about work. But most of their messages were flirtatious. I scrolled through them, each message stabbing at my heart.
How do you want to celebrate your birthday this time? You always love a sense of ceremony.
What else can I do? It's always with them, so boring. But I made sure to say I'd come back a day late from this trip, so we can celebrate together.
Wow, I never thought I'd get to experience the thrill of an affair.
I had come too suddenly this time, and Emily hadn't had a chance to delete their chat history. Their messages continued almost daily. Even though they were on a business trip together, doing everything together, they still acted like a couple in love. The most recent message was from 2 minutes ago, with James asking if she was okay. Emily hadn't had a chance to reply. When I looked up again, Emily's eyes were filled with tears. I used to fall for this act. But now, I just felt disgusted. The room was filled with an uncomfortable silence as James and Emily stood facing each other. Emily's eyes were brimming with tears, and I could feel my anger rising.
How do you want to celebrate your birthday this time? You always love a sense of ceremony.
What else can I do? It's always with them, so boring. But I made sure to say I'd come back a day late from this trip, so we can celebrate together.
Wow, I never thought I'd get to experience the thrill of an affair.
I had come too suddenly this time, and Emily hadn't had a chance to delete their chat history. Their messages continued almost daily. Even though they were on a business trip together, doing everything together, they still acted like a couple in love. The most recent message was from 2 minutes ago, with James asking if she was okay. Emily hadn't had a chance to reply. When I looked up again, Emily's eyes were filled with tears. I used to fall for this act. But now, I just felt disgusted. Early the next morning, I took Daisy out of the room, only to find Emily already waiting at the door.
David.
I didn't want to pay attention to her, but Daisy whispered in my ear.
Isn't today Mommy's birthday?
I froze, not knowing how to explain to Daisy.
Yes, it's Mommy's birthday today. Can you stay with Mommy, baby?
Daisy instinctively looked at me. Seeing the hopeful look in her eyes, I couldn't bring myself to refuse. What does a child know? She only knows that her usually busy mom has time to play with her, and she's happy.
David, Emma wants to stay and play. Let's celebrate my birthday today.
I didn't say anything. Seeing my softened attitude, Emily immediately took Daisy into her arms. Watching her temporary goodwill, I remained silent. All day, Emily stayed by Daisy's side, going to the amusement park, the aquarium, and taking many photos. Throughout the day, Emily held my hand. Every time I tried to pull away, she held on tighter.
Daisy is still here.
Not wanting to see Daisy's disappointed look, I endured it. Seeing Daisy's happy smile, my heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand. I grew up in a single-parent family, and I know how much separation can affect a child. When I was 7, my parents parted ways, and I lived with my dad. At that time, I had just started first grade, and kids in my grade would point at me and call me a wild child. As I grew older, I became more self-conscious and sensitive. I was afraid of others looking at me with strange eyes, and I developed a people-pleasing personality. I don't want Daisy to go through that. Looking at Emily feeding Daisy ice cream, I felt very conflicted inside. After a day of playing, Daisy fell asleep as soon as we got in the car. I drove in silence, while Emily looked at me, her lips moving slightly.
I've completely cut ties with James. From now on, I'll stay with you and Daisy. David, can you forgive me this once? I've already applied to transfer to another department at work, so I'll have more time to spend with Daisy.
She showed me the application report and her messages.
I didn't sleep at all last night. David, I was so foolish before. I didn't cherish such a good husband and such a sweet daughter. David, please don't stay silent. When you do, I get anxious.
Seeing her remorseful look, I admit I softened. Especially when I saw Daisy's innocent face. I didn't say anything, but my resolve to separate began to waver. That night, after we got home, Emily swore in front of me and signed an agreement to leave the marriage with nothing. My heart completely crumbled. In the following days, Emily did as she promised, going to and from work on time, and even stopped going on business trips. Daisy's smile became more frequent, and she grew closer to Emily. Just when I thought she had truly changed, she gave me a huge surprise.
Emily, how do you want to celebrate your birthday this time? You always love a sense of ceremony.
What else can I do? It's always with them, so boring. But I made sure to say I'd come back a day late from this trip, so we can celebrate together.
Wow, I never thought I'd get to experience the thrill of an affair.
I had come too suddenly this time, and Emily hadn't had a chance to delete their chat history. Their messages continued almost daily. Even though they were on a business trip together, doing everything together, they still acted like a couple in love. The most recent message was from 2 minutes ago, with James asking if she was okay. Emily hadn't had a chance to reply. When I looked up again, Emily's eyes were filled with tears. I used to fall for this act. But now, I just felt disgusted.
No way. How many days have you actually taken care of our child? She has to stay with me.
I couldn't let my daughter call James dad.
Then we'll split the assets 50-50.
I couldn't believe how thick-skinned she was.
Then see you in court.
Emily glared at me for a while, then changed her clothes and left the house. That evening, when I went to pick up Daisy from school, she seemed a bit down. I thought something had happened at kindergarten and was about to ask when she suddenly looked up.
Dad, are you and Mom getting a divorce?
Who told you that?
Lily told me. She said her mom sent her to her grandma's house and hasn't picked her up for days because her parents are getting a divorce. Her mom has to work and doesn't have time to be with her.
I pressed my lips together, not knowing what to say. I wanted to talk to Daisy about the divorce, but she was too young. I was afraid she wouldn't understand.
Dad, if you and Mom separate, who will I live with? Lily said that when her parents separated, she lived with her grandparents. She misses her mom so much.
My grip on the steering wheel tightened as I cautiously asked Daisy.
Who do you want to live with?
I don't know.
Daisy frowned, and my heart tightened with hers. That night, I took Daisy home. Emily hadn't been home for several days. During this time, I kept urging her to sign the divorce papers. That night, I thought a lot. I wanted to give Daisy a complete family, even if it meant compromising myself. But I never expected Emily to do something so outrageous. The next day, when I went to pick up Daisy from school, the teacher told me she had been picked up by a man. I had a bad feeling and immediately called Peter.
Weren't you supposed to pick up Daisy? I didn't go. What's wrong?
Not wanting to worry him, I didn't tell him. Then I called Emily, but she denied it. Finally, I called John and Anna.
Daisy is staying with us for a couple of days. She hasn't been to her grandparents' house in a long time.
I gritted my teeth. It wasn't just a long time, she had never been there since she was born. Emily never cared about Daisy, and neither did her parents. Her parents favored boys over girls. They weren't happy when Emily was born. And when Emily had a daughter, they were even angrier. So Daisy never liked her grandparents. Daisy had been anxious these past few days, and I couldn't imagine how miserable she would be with them. I had to get her back now. When I arrived at John and Anna's house and was about to knock, I heard laughter inside.
James, I heard you got promoted. Eat more. Your annual salary must be at least $50,000 now. You're really successful.
Anna's flattering voice made me shiver.
Mom, do you regret your decision back then?
Back then, I didn't recognize your worth. Now, with the assets from your divorce with Brian, you can help your cousin build a 2-story house. He hasn't married yet, and he'll need your support in the future.
The more I listened, the colder I felt. Emily's parents favored her cousin like their own son. Over the years, I had helped him a lot. It turned out Emily broke up with James because of money. Her parents agreed to our marriage because of money. Daisy hadn't said a word until I heard her crying.
You're so annoying, just like your dad. Why are you so bothersome?
My heart sank, and I started banging on the door. The door opened, and I saw Daisy sitting on the floor, crying, with food scattered around her. As soon as she saw me, she ran over.
Daddy.
She cried even harder. My heart ached terribly. I looked at the people around, who seemed surprised to see me.
Emma is really spoiled by you. She starts crying at the slightest scolding, with no manners at all.
I held Daisy, my eyes bloodshot.
That's still better than having your own children, but giving all your wealth to others.
Emily was displeased by this.
How can you say that about my parents? If the child stays with you, her values will be ruined sooner or later.
I didn't realize Emily had been so manipulated by her parents. I glanced around, ready to leave.
Want to leave? Sign this agreement first.
It was a new divorce agreement drafted by Emily. I smirked. This whole family was scheming against me. Daisy cried even harder, and I had no patience to argue with them. I strode forward and overturned the table they were eating at.
Impossible! Your daughter made the mistake first. Leaving with nothing was her own agreement, or we'll see each other in court.
They still wouldn't give up, so I picked up a chair from the floor and smashed it down. Then I took Daisy home. Daisy was terribly frightened, and I was furious. But I didn't expect a woman to come to my door the next day. She said she was James's girlfriend, Sophia, and had just discovered yesterday that James had been cheating on her and using her for his promotion.
I heard they were each other's first love. Can you swallow this?
I looked at her, recalling yesterday's events. Daisy hadn't slept well all night, waking up frequently and clinging to me, saying she didn't want her mom.
What do you want to do?
I fiddled with Daisy's little trinket.
I want them to pay the price, to be utterly disgraced.
She then detailed the entire plan. Meanwhile, Emily was also taunting me.
If we divorce, I must have half of the assets. If you don't agree, give me Daisy. You know, the law tends to favor the mother in custody cases.
I could almost see Emily's smug face. I immediately agreed to Sophia's suggestion, and we teamed up. The first step was to expose Emily and James to their company. Since they worked at the same company, the management was concerned about the negative impact. Sophia, being a media person, quickly drafted a story and sent an email to the company's higher-ups. She also offered to promote their products unconditionally. The company quickly made a decision. That afternoon, Emily called me.
Was it you?
What happened?
Ha, still pretending? Was it you who sent that email to the higher-ups? Brian doesn't dare to admit it?
So what if it was me? Emily, did you ever think about this when you were doing those things?
I hung up the phone. Soon after, I received a video on my phone. It showed Emily and James trying to negotiate with the company but being unceremoniously thrown out by security. I was in a good mood all afternoon and also filed for divorce in court. Emily's current demand was to split the assets equally, with Daisy staying with me. But why should I share the money I worked so hard to earn with her? I've already supported her family enough over the years. Now, I wouldn't give up my rightful share. The first hearing came quickly. Divorce is a complicated process, even with all the evidence of Emily's infidelity. But I was patient, waiting for the result. After the first hearing, Emily approached me.
Don't be too ruthless. Even a rabbit will bite when cornered.
I shrugged and walked away with Daisy. During this time, Peter called me.
As long as you've thought it through, I won't interfere. Emily's parents came to see me, but they weren't sincere. Just make sure Daisy isn't hurt.
I promise.
Fortunately, Daisy's mood improved while staying with me. I also asked her kindergarten teacher to pay extra attention to her. Daisy gradually returned to her old self. I finally felt a bit relieved. During this period, Sophia and I kept discussing our next steps. I thought this was almost over. But then, an online account started posting videos about how hard it was at home, being manipulated by her husband and disliked by her child. Because it reflected social reality and touched on hot topics like family and children, it quickly gained sympathy from netizens. In one of the videos, I saw a familiar bracelet. It was the one I gave Emily on our 3rd wedding anniversary. I suddenly understood what she had been doing during her disappearance. She wanted to stir public opinion, have everyone condemn me, and then profit from the internet. I sneered, saved the video, and sent it to Sophia. Coincidentally, Sophia had also sent it to me.
Didn't expect those two to live off me and then put on such a show.
Disgusting.
I pursed my lips, thinking about the next step.
Cheerful, how do you want to celebrate your birthday this time? You always love a sense of ceremony.
Sad, what else can I do? It's always with them, so boring. But I made sure to say I'd come back a day late from this trip, so we can celebrate together.
Excited, wow, I never thought I'd get to experience the thrill of a secret rendezvous.
I had come too suddenly this time, and Emily hadn't had a chance to delete their chat history. Their messages continued almost daily. Even though they were on a business trip together, doing everything together, they still acted like a couple in love. The most recent message was from 2 minutes ago, with James asking if she was okay. Emily hadn't had a chance to reply. When I looked up again, Emily's eyes were filled with tears. I used to fall for this act. But now, I just felt disgusted. James looked at Emily with a questioning gaze.
How do you want to celebrate your birthday this time? You always love a sense of ceremony.
What else can I do? It's always with them, so boring. But I made sure to say I'd come back a day late from this trip, so we can celebrate together.
Wow, I never thought I'd get to experience the thrill of an affair.
I had come too suddenly this time, and Emily hadn't had a chance to delete their chat history. Their messages continued almost daily. Even though they were on a business trip together, doing everything together, they still acted like a couple in love. The most recent message was from 2 minutes ago, with James asking if she was okay. Emily hadn't had a chance to reply. When I looked up again, Emily's eyes were filled with tears. I used to fall for this act. But now, I just felt disgusted.